wealthy farmer gave his worst land to his sick son. 6 months later, he regretted it. Richard Miller was known throughout Bakersfield as the most respected and successful farmer of the last 50 years. On that March morning, he made a decision that would shake his family irreversibly. "Michael, you'll take that plot way in the back near the dry creek," the patriarch said to his eldest son, pointing to the rockiest part of the property. The 28-year-old swallowed hard, feeling the heavy air struggle to enter his lungs. Since childhood, Michael had faced breathing problems that left him winded after any physical exertion. His father had always seen this condition as a weakness, a sign that the firstborn lacked the strength needed to run the family business. "All right, Dad," Michael replied, surprised by his own calmness. Richard had expected protests, tears, or at least questions. Instead, his son accepted without hesitation the land all the workers avoided. It was a 5-acre stretch covered in rocks, with seemingly barren soil where even grass struggled to grow. "The boys will get the good land, close to the main house," the farmer continued, referring to his 2 younger sons. "You'll have tractors, modern equipment, everything you need." Brian and Kevin, 24 and 22 respectively, exchanged satisfied glances. They had always been their father's favorites, the ones who showed strength and willingness for hard work. Michael, on the other hand, was seen as the fragile son, the one who spent more time reading than working the fields. "Thank you, Dad," Michael said, rising from the kitchen table where the family had breakfast. Sarah Miller, his mother, watched silently. Married to Richard for 35 years, she knew her husband's stubborn temper and understood that any interference now would only make things worse. But her mother's heart ached at the injustice done to her eldest son. Michael left the house carrying an old hoe and a pickaxe. The sun was already warming the air when he reached the land that was now his. He stood there, surveying the rocks scattered everywhere, the dry, cracked earth, the few withered shrubs stubbornly growing between the stones. "What in the world are you going to do with this place, kid?" asked Earl, one of the farm's oldest workers, passing by on his horse. "I'm going to plant, Mr. Earl," Michael replied simply. The 60-year-old man let out a rough laugh. "Plant? In this quarry? Boy, even ants can't build a home here. Your dad gave you this land because he knows you won't get anything out of it." Michael didn't answer. He started working, removing the larger rocks one by one. With every movement, his breathing grew heavier, but he kept going. He worked only until 9 in the morning, when the sun grew stronger. Then he stopped, jotted some notes in an old notebook, and left. At lunch, Brian didn't miss the chance to tease his brother. "So, Michael, planted anything in that quarry yet?" "Not yet," Michael answered calmly, slowly chewing his beans and rice. "I bet you'll give up by the end of the year," Kevin said, laughing. "There's not even an inch of good soil in that place." Richard watched his sons carefully. On one hand, he felt proud of Brian and Kevin, who displayed the confidence and determination he always valued. On the other, there was something about Michael's calmness that unsettled him. He had expected to see his eldest son defeated, acknowledging his limitations, but the young man seemed serene. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the following days, Michael kept to the same routine. He worked from 6 to 9 in the morning and from 4 to 6 in the afternoon, always carrying his notebook and taking notes. The neighbors began to comment on the young man's strange dedication to that impossible piece of land. "Poor boy," said Martha, the miller's neighbor. "Richard was so cruel. Giving that rocky patch to his sick son is almost humiliating." "That's true," agreed Walter, Martha's husband. "The boy has always been hard-working, even with that chest problem. He didn't deserve this." Richard heard these comments when he went to town to fetch feed for the cattle. People looked at him with a mix of respect and disapproval. The farmer felt irritated. No one understood that he was protecting Michael from greater failures. It was better to give him poor land than to watch him fail with the good fields. A week later, Michael did something that left the whole family stunned. He came home carrying several unfamiliar plant seedlings. "What kind of plants are these?" asked Sarah Miller, curious. "They're special vegetables, Mom. I'm going to try planting them on my land." Brian and Kevin burst out laughing. Vegetables, Brian said, nearly choking on his food. In that rocky patch? You've lost your mind. Michael, be reasonable, Richard interjected firmly. You can't waste your time on this nonsense. If you want to work, plant corn or beans like we've always done here. Dad, I've done a lot of research on that land. I believe these plants can work. Research where? His father questioned suspiciously. On the internet, in books. I talked to some agricultural engineers. Richard slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes rattle. Internet, books. Since when do you learn farming from books, boy? Experience comes from practice, from sweat, from decades of working the land. I know, Dad, but sometimes there are new techniques that can help. New techniques? The farmer stood up, red with anger. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather all worked this land the same way. And it worked. I won't let you bring in modern inventions to ruin our family's tradition. Michael lowered his head, but didn't give up on his plants. He started planting them in the early hours of the morning, while his father was still asleep. He prepared organic compost with kitchen scraps, dried leaves, and other materials he found around the property. Sarah watched everything in secret. One morning she couldn't resist and went to her son's plot. Good morning, son. Hi, Mom. Michael smiled, wiping sweat from his face. What brings you here so early? I wanted to see how your work is going. Sarah looked around and was amazed. The land that had looked like a desert 2 weeks earlier now had small, organized areas with rocks forming natural beds. The seedlings were planted carefully, each with its proper space. Son, you've been working so hard. Your father shouldn't have... Mom, it's okay. Michael gently interrupted. Actually, I think this land might be an opportunity. How so? This soil has unique characteristics. It's rocky, but that means it drains water well. And these rocks protect the plants from strong winds. I just need to treat it differently. Sarah didn't fully understand what her son was saying, but she could see the passion in his eyes. It was the first time in years she'd seen Michael truly excited about something. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. The first plants began to sprout. Richard was coming back from the pasture when he saw small green dots appearing among the rocks on Michael's land. What in the world? He muttered, stopping the pickup truck to get a better look. He got out of the vehicle and walked over to the beds. There really were plants growing there, small but visibly healthy. How was this possible? That night, during dinner, Richard couldn't hold back. Michael, I went to your plot today. The boy stopped chewing, bracing for a scolding. There are plants growing there. Yes, Dad. How? That land is useless. I treated the soil before planting. I used organic compounds to improve the soil quality. Organic compounds? Richard made a disgusted face. What kind of nonsense is that? They're natural materials that nourish the soil without chemicals. Plant scraps, aged manure, fruit peels. Brian and Kevin exchanged mocking glances. So, you planted in garbage, said Brian. And wasted time making compost out of food scraps, added Kevin. Richard shook his head, irritated. Michael, this isn't serious farming. It's child's play. Real farming uses fertilizers, pesticides, modern technology. Dad, these organic techniques are ancient. Our great-grandparents farmed this way before chemicals existed. That was a different time, son. Nowadays, if you don't use technology, you can't compete in the market. The argument went on late into the night. Richard forbade it. Michael politely explained his reasons. Sarah tried to mediate and the brothers cracked jokes. In the end, nothing was resolved. The next morning, Michael continued his routine. Now, besides tending the plants, he studied every leaf, every sprout, jotting everything down in his notebook. His breathing had improved too. Working in that chemical-free environment, his bouts of shortness of breath had lessened considerably. A month after the first planting, a stranger showed up at the property. It was Thomas Brown, an organic produce buyer for a supermarket chain in Chicago. Good morning. I'm looking for the person in charge of the organic production on this farm. Richard, who greeted him, was confused. There's no organic production here. This is a traditional farm. That's odd. I was told there was an organic grower here. Do you have any specialty vegetable crops? Just then, Michael appeared from the field, his hands dirty with soil. "Maybe you're looking for me," the young man said. Thomas looked at him, then at Richard. "You grow organic." "I'm trying to, yes." "Can I see the produce?" Richard stepped in immediately. "No, you can't. We don't sell anything organic here. That's just my son's insignificant little experiment." Thomas was taken aback, so was Michael, but he respected his father's decision. "I see. Well, if you change your mind, here's my card. We're always looking for new organic suppliers. The market is growing fast." After the man left, Richard called Michael for a serious talk. "Who told that man we have organic production here?" "I didn't tell anyone, Dad. Maybe someone in the area mentioned it." "Listen carefully, Michael. I don't want any of those charlatans setting foot here. People who sell organic are all opportunists, charging 3 times more for something worthless." "Dad, organic products are different. They don't use pesticides, they're healthier." "Healthier?" Richard let out a bitter laugh. "Son, I've eaten food with pesticides for 50 years and I'm still here, strong and healthy. This organic talk is just a scheme to make easy money." "But Dad..." "No buts. I don't want any more organic buyers coming around here. And you're going to stop this nonsense, pull up those plants and grow something serious on that land." Michael's heart sank. His plants were growing beautifully, healthy, with no problems at all. It was the first time in his life he felt truly fulfilled by work. "Dad, just give me 1 more month. If it doesn't work out, I'll rip everything out and plant whatever you want." Richard thought for a moment. A month was enough time to prove those plants would come to nothing. "Fine, 1 month, but after that I want to see corn planted there." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The month flew by. Michael worked with even more dedication, waking before sunrise to tend to his plants. Sarah Miller began helping him in secret, bringing water when his father wasn't around. "My son, your plants are beautiful," she said, admiring the healthy growth of the vegetables. "Thanks, Mom. It seems they liked this soil." "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why aren't you angry with your dad? He gave you the worst plot, forbids you from selling your produce. Any other son would have fought back hard by now." Michael stopped watering the plants and looked at his mother. "Mom, I know Dad loves me. He's just scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared I'll fail. Scared his beliefs might be wrong. Scared of losing control over the family he's built his whole life." Sarah was struck by her son's maturity. "And you? Aren't you scared?" "I am. But I also have hope. For the first time in my life, I feel like I've found my place. Working here, breathing this clean air, watching the plants grow, it's like I was born for this." At that very moment, Brian and Kevin arrived on their motorcycles, coming back from a party in town. "Hey, Michael! Still playing farmer?" Brian shouted, revving his engine near the beds and kicking up dust. "Watch the plants!" Michael called out. "Plants!" Kevin staggered off his bike, clearly drunk. "What's so important about these plants?" He walked over to the beds and kicked one of the largest seedlings. "Kevin, stop!" Sarah shouted. "Why, Mom? It's just weeds planted in dirt." Michael felt anger rising but held himself back. He approached his brother calmly. "Kevin, you're drunk. Go sleep it off." "Who do you think you are giving me orders?" Kevin shoved Michael, who lost his balance and fell onto one of the beds, crushing several plants. Brian laughed at the scene, but Sarah exploded. "Enough! Both of you stop this right now." "Mom, the one who's wrong here is Michael," Brian said, "wasting time on this nonsense instead of helping with the real work on the farm." "Real work? You two spend more time partying than working." "We do work," Kevin defended, "with modern machines doing real farming." "Real farming doesn't destroy others' work," Sarah snapped, helping Michael up. The noise of the argument woke Richard, who appeared in his pajamas. "What's all this commotion?" "Dad, Kevin destroyed some of Michael's plants," Sarah explained. "So what?" Richard said, still groggy. "They're just weeds anyway." Michael brushed the dirt off his clothes and looked at his father. Dad, those plants represent 3 months of work. 3 months of playing around, you mean? It's not playing. It's my life's project. Life's project? Richard started waking up and growing irritated. Your life's project should be learning to run this farm like a man. I am a man, Dad, and I'm running my part of the farm my way. Your way is wrong. How can you be so sure if you've never tried to understand what I'm doing? The question caught Richard off guard. It was true. He'd never asked for details about Michael's work, only criticized and forbidden it. I don't need to understand nonsense, he shot back defensively. Nonsense? Dad, come here with me tomorrow morning. Let me show you what I've managed to do in these 3 months. I don't have time for 1 hour, Dad. Give me 1 hour of your time. Richard looked into his son's eyes. There was something there he couldn't quite decipher. Determination, pride, love? All right, 1 hour. The next morning, Michael waited for his father on the plot of land. Richard arrived promptly at 6, still in a bad mood. Let's get this over with. Thanks for coming, Dad. Look around. Richard waved a dismissive hand, but then stopped. The land was unrecognizable. The stones that once seemed like obstacles now formed an organized system of raised beds. Plants of various types grew vigorously, each in its proper place. There was a simple but effective drip irrigation system made from repurposed plastic bottles. How did you do this? He asked, impressed despite himself. First, I studied the soil. I found it has a rich mineral composition, but lacks organic matter. The rocks, which seem like a problem, actually help with drainage and protect the roots from excessive heat. Michael led his father to inspect the beds up close. Look at these lettuces. They're ready for harvest. Richard observed the large, vibrant green leaves. They do look nice, he admitted grudgingly. Try a leaf. Try it. Raw. Go ahead, Dad. There's no pesticides. Richard hesitated, but finally took a leaf and chewed. The flavor was intense, sweet, completely different from the common lettuce he knew. It's good. Now look at these cherry tomatoes. The small red tomatoes glowed on the vine, perfect and juicy. Try one. Richard ate the tomato and his eyes widened. It was the most intense flavor he'd ever tasted in a tomato. Wow, Michael, what is this taste? It's the natural flavor, Dad. No rush, no chemicals forcing growth. The plant grows at its own pace and develops its full taste. They continued the tour. Michael showed each bed, explaining every technique, every detail. Richard realized his son wasn't playing around. There was deep knowledge here, a genuine passion. And this water system? Drip irrigation. Saves 70% of the water we'd use with a hose and gives each plant exactly what it needs. You came up with this? No, Dad. It's an old technique, but not widely used in this area. I researched sustainable farming methods a lot. Richard was conflicted. Everything he saw went against his lifelong beliefs, but the results were undeniable. Michael, why didn't you tell me you were this far along? I tried, Dad, but you always said it was nonsense. It's just so different from what we've always done here. I know, but different doesn't mean wrong. Richard walked in silence for a few minutes, taking in every detail. At the end of the promised hour, he turned to his son. All right, you can keep doing this, but don't expect me to fully understand or approve. It was a small step, but Michael was moved. Thank you, Dad. 2 weeks later, the time came for the first official harvest. Michael had selected the best produce to show the family. Perfect lettuces, bright red tomatoes, large sweet carrots, and various aromatic herbs. During lunch, Sarah prepared a salad entirely from her son's crops. Everyone try this salad, she said proudly. Brian and Kevin ate without much interest at first, but soon began praising it. Man, this lettuce is delicious, said Brian. And this tomato is so sweet, Kevin agreed. Richard ate in silence, but it was clear he approved. Mom, what's this different seasoning you used? Kevin asked. It's the herbs Michael planted. Basil, oregano, parsley, all fresh. The brothers looked at Michael with a different expression. For the first time, there was respect in their eyes. Michael, seriously, this salad is really good, said Brian. Thank you. How did you manage to grow these things in that quarry? Michael began explaining his techniques. The brothers listened carefully, asking genuine questions. Richard was paying attention too, though he tried to hide it. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Thomas Brown, the organic produce buyer, returned to the farm. "Good afternoon, remember me? I was here 2 months ago looking for organic products." Richard greeted him, still suspicious. "I remember. I already told you we don't sell organic here. Actually, I heard from people in town that you have a very good organic production. I came to give it another chance." "Who said that?" "Several people. The folks at the Bakersfield market, some neighbors. They say there's a young man here working miracles with organic farming." Michael appeared at that moment, returning from the field with a basket full of freshly harvested produce. "Good afternoon," he greeted the visitor. Thomas looked at the basket and his eyes lit up. "Are these your organic vegetables?" "Yes, they are." "May I see?" Michael glanced at his father, who hesitated but finally nodded. Thomas examined the produce carefully. He smelled it, touched it, even tasted a few leaves. Excellent quality, perfect size, intense flavor, impeccable appearance. "How much do you produce per month?" "For now it's just for family use," Michael replied. "But I can increase production." "Son, I'd buy everything you could produce. My clients are desperate for high-quality organic products like these." "What would the price be?" asked Richard, interested despite himself. "For this quality, I'd pay used $15 per pound for lettuce, used $20 per pound for cherry tomatoes, used $25 per pound for aromatic herbs." Richard nearly choked. These were 3 times the price of conventional products. "And you can sell at those prices?" "We can, with a waiting list. The organic market is booming. Restaurants, specialty supermarkets, health-conscious people. Everyone wants quality organic produce." "But why are the prices so high?" Richard wanted to know. "Because production is more labor-intensive, the yield per acre is lower, and demand far exceeds supply. Plus, the product is superior in quality and flavor." Thomas turned to Michael. "Young man, if you can produce 500 pounds per month of varied products, I'll buy everything for you $10,000. Richard did the math in his head. $10,000 a month from just 5 acres. That was nearly what he made from 50 acres with conventional farming. "Is that possible?" he asked his son. "With a few more beds and maybe a small greenhouse, yes." "And how much would it cost to set that up?" "About $5,000, using simple materials." Thomas left his card and said goodbye. "Think about the offer. I'll be available when you decide." After the man left, the family fell silent. Richard was visibly shaken. Everything he believed about farming was being challenged by his son's results. "Michael," he finally said, "I need to understand something. How did you learn all this?" "By studying, Dad. I read many books, took online courses, talked to experts. I discovered a whole world of techniques we didn't know." "Then why doesn't everyone use these techniques?" "Because they require more knowledge and dedication. It's easier to use chemicals, even though they're more expensive and harm the environment." "Harm how?" Michael took a deep breath. It was the first time his father had shown genuine interest in his explanations. "Pesticides don't just kill pests, they also kill beneficial insects. They contaminate the soil, the water, and harm our health. And they create dependency. The more you use, the more you need. But it's always worked here on the farm. It worked for a while. But Dad, haven't you noticed we need to use more and more pesticides, and that costs keep rising?" Richard stopped to think. It was true. Over the last few years, spending on pesticides and fertilizers had doubled, yet productivity hadn't increased proportionally. And organic farming doesn't have these problems? It has other challenges, but it's a sustainable system. You improve the soil over time instead of depleting it. It attracts natural predators for pests. You produce healthier food and make more money. Sarah Miller watched the conversation with emotion. It was the first time in years she'd seen father and son talk about farming without arguing. "Richard," she said, "why not let Michael try? If it doesn't work, you can go back to the old methods." "It's just..." It's too risky to change everything at once. You don't have to change everything, Dad, said Michael. I can expand my area gradually. You keep using your methods on the other land, and we'll compare the results. Brian and Kevin, who were listening, exchanged glances. Dad, maybe it's a good idea, said Brian. If Michael is making more money per acre. It's true, Kevin agreed. And we could learn those techniques too. Richard looked at his 3 sons. They were all on Michael's side. Sarah too. He felt as if the world he'd built over a lifetime was crumbling. I need to think. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. That night Richard couldn't sleep. He stayed on the porch staring at the fields he knew like the back of his hand. 50 years of hard work, following the methods he'd learned from his father and grandfather. And now his weakest son, the one he'd always considered unfit for farming, was proving he knew more than him. Sarah appeared with 2 cups of coffee. Can't sleep? No. She sat beside her husband, thinking about what Michael said. I'm thinking about everything, Sarah. How I raised our kids, how I treated Michael all these years. Richard, you're a good father. You were just trying to protect him. Was I? Or was I trying to prove he really was weak? Sarah touched her husband's arm. Why did you always treat Michael differently from the other boys? Richard sighed deeply. Because he was sickly, always out of breath, always tired. I thought he couldn't handle the farm's hard work. And now? Now I see I might have been wrong about a lot of things. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Sarah, did you know Michael was studying farming? Yes. He spent hours on the computer, reading books, taking notes. I always wanted to tell you, but you never listened. Why didn't you insist? Because you're stubborn, Richard. Once you get an idea in your head, you don't listen to anyone. I am, he admitted. And maybe I've wasted a lot of time being stubborn. The next morning, Richard woke up with a decision. He went to find Michael, who was already working in his plots. Good morning, son. Good morning, Dad. Michael, I accept your proposal. You can expand your organic production. The young man stopped working and looked at his father in disbelief. Really? Really? I'll give you 5 more acres, and I want you to teach your brothers these techniques. Michael hugged his father, emotional. Thank you, Dad. You won't regret it. I hope not. But there's one condition. What? You'll teach me too. I want to understand everything you've learned. Of course, Dad, it'll be my pleasure. In the following months, the Miller Organic Farm underwent a complete transformation. Michael expanded his organic production, Brian and Kevin began learning the new techniques, and Richard, surprisingly, proved to be a dedicated student. The first contract with Thomas Brown was a success. Within 3 months, Michael was regularly delivering 500 pounds of organic produce, receiving the promised US $10,000 monthly. The money was nearly double what the family had earned with conventional farming on the same land. Brian was the first of the brothers to fully convert. Seeing Michael's results, he decided to transform his own plot into organic production as well. Michael, can you teach me how to make those organic composts? Of course, come here, I'll show you. Brian turned out to be a talented student. In no time, he was producing his own organic goods with quality comparable to his brothers. Kevin took longer to be convinced, but when he saw the sales numbers, he also decided to make the change. Man, you guys are making way more money than me, he admitted. I want to learn too. The transformation wasn't just financial. The farm's environment changed completely. Without pesticides, biodiversity returned. Birds, bees, ladybugs, and other beneficial insects appeared in large numbers. Richard watched it all with growing admiration. One day, he walked through the property with Michael, observing the changes. Son, this place is starting to look like it did when I was a kid. What do you mean, Dad? When I was little, there were way more animals around here. Birds, butterflies, bees. Over time, they all disappeared. Pesticides kill all the insects, Dad, the good ones and the bad. And now they're back. They're back because we've created a balanced environment. Natural predators control the pests. We don't need poison. Richard stopped in front of a tomato bed, where several bees were busy pollinating the flowers. "You know what, Michael? I think I've learned more about farming in the last 3 months than in 50 years. You've always known a lot, Dad. You were just using different techniques." "Wrong techniques, you mean?" "Not wrong, just suited for the time. Now we have the knowledge and technology to do better." Richard smiled. His son had an incredible way of being generous, even after everything they'd been through. 6 months after the first harvest, something unexpected happened. A group of agronomists from the University of California visited the farm. "We heard you've been achieving exceptional results with organic farming," said Professor Dr. Robert Wilson. "We'd like to learn about the techniques you're using." Michael grew nervous. These were university professors, people with far more education than him. I really just applied techniques I learned from books and the internet. But the results you've achieved are outstanding. We're documenting success stories in sustainable agriculture." The professor and his team spent the entire day on the farm, asking questions, taking photos, and collecting data. They were impressed by the organization of the beds, the quality of the produce, and the sustainability of the system. "Michael," the professor said before leaving, "we'd like to invite you to present your results at the Regional Sustainable Agriculture Conference in Chicago." "Me? Present at a conference?" "Yes. Your work is a practical example of how organic farming can be viable and profitable." Richard, who had been listening, felt immense pride in his son. "Professor, he'll definitely present," he said, "and I insist." 2 weeks later, Michael stood before an audience of 200 people in Chicago, presenting the results of his organic farm. Richard, Sarah, and his brothers came along to support him. The presentation was a success. Michael explained his techniques with clarity and passion, showing before and after photos, productivity data, and profitability figures. The audience was impressed. "How did you figure out that rocky land was suitable for organic farming?" someone from the audience asked. "Actually, my father gave me that land because he thought it was useless," Michael replied, looking at Richard in the crowd. "But I studied its characteristics and realized it could be an advantage, not a problem." Richard felt his eyes grow moist. His son was turning rejection into a success story, without bitterness or resentment. After the presentation, several producers approached Michael to learn more about his techniques. Some asked to visit the farm, others wanted to hire him as a consultant. On the way home, the family was euphoric. "Michael, you killed it," said Brian. "That was amazing, bro," Kevin agreed. Sarah was crying with emotion. "My son, I'm so proud." Richard drove in silence, still processing everything that had happened that day. "Dad," Michael said, "thank you for supporting me today." "Thank you for what?" "You're the one who deserves congratulations. For believing in me, even when I was just the sick kid who got the worst piece of land." Richard pulled the car over to the shoulder. He got out and asked everyone to step outside. "Family, I need to say something." They all gathered in a circle on the deserted rural road. "Michael, I've spent my whole life making a terrible mistake with you." The young man tried to interrupt, but his father continued. "I thought giving you that bad land was protecting myself from a bigger failure. But really, I was protecting myself from discovering you could be better than me." "Dad, let me finish." You taught me that being strong isn't about brute force. It's about intelligence, patience, dedication. You turned a rocky patch into a productive garden. You transformed our family, and you transformed me." Richard hugged his son, emotional. "Forgive me for taking so long to see who you really are. I forgave you a long time ago, Dad. Thank you for giving me that land. It was the best gift of my life." Brian and Kevin also stepped in for the hug. "Sorry, bro," Brian said. "We always treated you badly." "And you were always generous with us," Kevin added. Sarah joined the group hug, crying with happiness. "Now we're a real family," she said. When they got home, a surprise was waiting. Thomas Brown was on the porch with 3 buyers. "Good evening. I heard you were at the conference today. These are representatives from a restaurant chain in Los Angeles. They want to sign an exclusive supply contract." One of the men introduced himself. "I'm Scott Parker from Natural Harvest. We have 20 organic specialty restaurants. We'd like to buy your entire production." "Entire production?" Yes. And we'd pay 30% above the current price, but we'd need a guarantee of regular supply and gradual expansion. Richard looked at his sons. What do you think? I think we need a family meeting to decide, Michael said. Of course, Scott agreed. Here's our proposal. Think it over carefully. After the visitors left, the family gathered in the living room. Guys, this is way more than I ever dreamed, Michael said. It's an incredible opportunity, Brian agreed. But it'll take a lot of work from all of us, Kevin pointed out. And investment, Sarah added. Richard listened carefully. Michael, do you think we can meet this demand? With planning and dedication, yes, but we'd need to convert almost the entire farm to organic. And you'd be willing? I would, but the decision is up to the whole family. Richard looked at each of his sons, then at his wife. Sarah, you've always been the wisdom of this house. What do you think? I think God has given us a chance to start over, to build something new based on what we've learned. Brian? Kevin? I'm in, Dad, said Brian. I want to learn everything Michael can teach me. Me too, said Kevin. No more being the lazy brother. I want to work for real. Richard stood up and walked to the window, gazing at the dark fields outside. 50 years ago, my father taught me how to work this land. I thought I'd pass the same knowledge on to you. Today I realize you have much more to teach me than I do you. He turned to his family. Michael, you'll be the general manager of organic production. Brian and Kevin, you'll be his assistants. And I'll be the most dedicated student you've ever seen. Really, Dad? Asked Michael, moved. Really. Starting today, this is the Miller Organic Farm, and you'll lead our transformation. They all hugged again, crying with happiness. A year later, Miller Organic Farm was one of the most respected in the region. It supplied 3 supermarket chains, 5 restaurant chains, and had a waiting list for new clients. Michael became a reference in organic farming, consulting for other producers. Brian and Kevin became experts in composting and biological pest control. Richard, at 68, discovered it's never too late to learn new things. More important than financial success, the family had found each other. Old rivalries and resentments gave way to mutual respect and collaboration. One morning, Richard walked alone to the plot where it all began. Now just a small part of the farm's vast organic production, it was still special. There was Michael, as always, tending to his plants with care. Good morning, son. Good morning, Dad. You know what I was thinking? What? If I hadn't given you this terrible plot, none of this would have happened. Michael smiled. That's true. Sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as problems, and sometimes the most stubborn parents learn the most important lessons from the children they underestimated. They worked together that morning, father and son, side by side, just as Richard had always dreamed. Only now, instead of the son learning from the father, it was the father learning from the son. And both knew this was the most beautiful form of love. The humility to admit when we're wrong, and the generosity to forgive those who took time to see our truth. The rocky plot that once symbolized rejection had become the cradle of a new family, united by farming, respect, and above all, the true love that overcomes any obstacle. The end. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this story? Share in the comments if you've experienced something similar or have any family farming stories. Did Richard do the right thing in the end by admitting his mistake? Was Michael wise to forgive? Your opinion means a lot to us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.